Okay, so I was interrupted by two dogs. Anyways, so going to so the second point to that story is the more pertinent point, which is that in that story, it appears as if the new variety of frog is better fit to the environment, but because of its the increased capacity at capturing flies, one of the things that occurs is it actually changes the environment. The environment changes, and as it changes, it becomes less fit to the new environment because it's going to continue to catch a lot of the flies. And that's the point that I wanted to borrow from evolution theory, and that was borrowed by these group of complex adaptive system scientists and thinkers. I still have a slight cough. In talking about optimizing one's position in a terrain. So the old model was that, yeah, there's a terrain and we want to find the optimum position, the best solution. What they all overlooked and what the paradigm shift was about was that they had overlooked a very simple and obvious feature of the terrain, right? When we go outside and we go out into the country and we see mountains and hills and so on, we think, oh, there's the mountaintop, so we run to it. So it's easy to have that image and to have that analogy in our minds when we think about life solutions. But the evolution theory supplies the obvious fact, which is that as we move and as time passes, the environment is changing. And another way to say that is in this graphical terrain, the whole terrain isn't fixed. It's not staying still. Things are moving. So instead of a fixed terrain, a better image might be thinking of the surface of an ocean. When you think of the surface of an ocean, it's just constant change, undulating and moving. So at one moment in time, you might have a wave, the crest of the wave, right here. But we all know a second later, that same geographical point will be left by the wave and it will be at a lower place. And similarly, the real terrain in life is that things are constantly moving up and down. So if we see a high peak at a moment in time and we start moving toward it, as soon as we've taken the first step, we're probably off in terms of our trajectory. So to continue along the trajectory, by the time we get there, we may end up at the bottom of a deep hole, a deep trough, for all we know. Or we could just end up at a place that's about, 3 units below where we started. We just don't know. And we can't predict because there's so many variables that sort of affect, hey, no, that affect the movement of the terrain. And so that's the insight that when we think about maximizing or optimizing or seeking the best, it's a pursuit that's filled with folly. And they can show that the strategy of seeking the best turns out not to be a great strategy. So then one might ask, what's a better strategy? Maybe some people are crazy and they think, well, what if we just go for the worst? Well, that turns out not to be a great strategy. Someone else might say, what if we just stand still and hope that the peak finds us? Now, that sounds wonderful if you're into wishful thinking, but it turns out that's also not the best strategy. That there are ways to maximize or to better one's outcome by moving in a particular way across a terrain that's constantly shifting. Some might say, what if you were to do a random walk? Just kind of wander around semi-randomly. Now, depending on my feelings, I'll just do this today, I'll do that. That turns out not to be a great strategy. So going for the best isn't a good strategy. Doing nothing is not a good strategy. Just wandering about is not a good strategy. Going for the worst is not a good strategy. Flipping a coin, which is the same as a random walk, is not a good strategy. You might ask, so then what strategy is there that actually leads to the best possible outcome or the better outcome almost all the time? And that's the strategy of good enough. It turns out that a strategy that doesn't seek to get to the top of the mountain, that doesn't aim at the peak, but that seeks good enough, just a slight improvement, turns out to be the strategy that keeps one from falling into deep troughs. It may not land one at the top of the mountain, although one accidentally could, because that can happen accidentally in under any strategy, but it keeps one from having really bad, essentially bad bottoms. And so the phrase that I remember they used was sufficiency over optimality. They may have used a different preposition, sufficiency overcomes optimality or sufficiency before optimality, but you get the idea. Going for what's good enough over going for what's best. And that just turns out to be the strategy to use. So I remember when I lived in Chico, I had a friend who had a child, and the child was entering preschool, or I don't know, one of those schools that they enter. And this person had two choices, and she said to me, I'm really struggling and stressed out, and I can't go to bed. And I said, why? She says, well, because I can't make up my mind. I can't decide about what's best. And my comment to her was, well, well, she asked me, I think, what do you think is best? And my response was, I would change the question. I wouldn't seek what's best. She said, why? And then I explained all this. And I explained to her that what I would seek is what's good enough. And it turned out in this case that what she considered the best had a lot of negative certain qualities also, and was stressful for her, I think financially mainly. What was good enough sounded okay overall, and it gave her peace. And so to me, if one makes a decision, the easier thing is to kind of go with one's sort of body or heart and choose in the direction that always gives one's peace, not what makes one excited. It's not about avoiding anything or not feeling something, but it's about which one gives one's peace. And she certainly had more sense of ease about the good enough option, but also from a philosophical, ideological perspective, I would say that the choice that aligns with good enough is the better choice, as opposed to the choice that aligns with this is the best, this is the absolute best, this is the greatest. Yeah, that's usually a sign that it's a bad choice. Good enough is almost always the best, ironically enough. That should be how I should title this. Good enough is the best. But no. Anyway, oh, I'm already at 7.5 minutes. Let me pause this. Let me end this one now.